Morning, everybody. Carmen here with Quality Sewing. And for this week's How Do I, we are going to go over how do you do machine applique and regular applique. Applique for some people is a bit of a mystery, and so I'm just going to go over some of the different ways that you can do applique and give you an ideas of a couple of different techniques. So you can see here I have a whole bunch of stuff set up, and I have behind me, I have a couple of quilts that have applique on them. You can see like up there the little light bulbs, right? Those are applique. And those have been appliqued on with a regular sewing machine in one manner. They just use a straight stitch to applique those on. Over here, you can see this is a gorgeous quilt that's been quilted, and these two moose are here. These guys, they just attach these with some adhesive. They actually never even stitch them down. So we're going to be talking about lots of different ways that you can do applique, and then here we have a whole bunch of fun samples, and I'm going to sort of sit down here, of embroidery applique. So here you can see these were all done in an embroidery machine, and you put all the different fabric pieces in, and then it has embroidered around it. And there's lots of different types of applique embroidery. So you can see that this one, they've even used a little vinyl in there, and it's done the straight stitch here. This is fabric, and there's some decorative stitches. There's a couple different pieces of fabric in this one. Over here, this is also an embroidery applique, and what's fun about this one is it has the very traditional satin stitch here, but it also has all of these designs in it. So I think this is a great, some different fun example. And then over here we have some things that were more, this was done on a regular sewing machine, and here you can see they've used that little blanket stitch. And so today we're going to talk about when you're using a regular sewing machine like this, you can either do a blanket stitch, you can do a straight stitch, or you could do a satin stitch. And a satin stitch is a stitch like this that is nice and thick. So let's see what other samples I have here. I have a couple of different ones. This is sort of a nice one to show how the applique was done here, because here the applique was done with the straight stitch, and then there's all of this beautiful thread painting that really accentuates the applique design, and it was done on the leaves here. So you can sort of see from my different selection of samples, these are all embroidery applique designs. There are lots of different ways to do applique, and there's lots of different types of stitches you can use, whether or not you're doing it on your home sewing machine, for like your just normal sewing machine, or if you're doing it with an embroidery design. So I'm going to set my samples back over here, and this guy out for a little bit later. Okay, so first I'm going to come over here and I am going to show you how you might do applique just on your regular sewing machine. So what I have here is I have just pretended that I was going to be doing this heart. And so the first thing I did is I did attach this heart to my fabric, and I used the Floriani Applique Wonder because this is Wonder Fusible, because this is a great product. It allows you to fuse your applique pieces down, so then that way when you're stitching around them, it is much easier. It doesn't gum up your needle, but it's great for quilting, garments, all of those different things. But it is so much easier to start with whatever you are appliquing for it to be attached to your fabric. And if this was an applique design that had lots of layers, you might have already layered them all together. And the way that you attach it to that applique wonder here is you use an iron, you layer it up, you'd want to use a pressing sheet, and then you would cut it out after you've already attached it to the fabric would be the easiest thing to do. And the way that you would normally cut these out if you don't have a scan and cut or something is you would just, trace the picture of whatever it is that you're trying to applique, and then you would cut it out with scissors or with a rotary cutter, depending on the shape. I find I like to use rotary cutters for as many things as possible because I get straighter, cleaner lines than when I use scissors. So here we go. So we have this here. It is all attached and ready. And then I've set my sewing machine up with an open toe foot. So here is an open toe foot, and you can see it there. The great thing about an open toe foot is you can really see what you are doing. And when we're going to do this applique and stitch around it here, we need to see where we're going. And that is why we use the open toe foot. You can see right through. I really like a clear open toe foot because I feel like it gives me the best visibility. Some open toe feet are metal. I also like that this has the little center notch there for me. So I can use that as one possible way to line things up. So there's a couple of different ways and different stitches you might choose to do some applique. So I'm going to show you on this heart 3 different things to sort of give you an idea, because you can play with it. And I find that with applique, trying to find a stitch that works well for your project and that works best for you for taking those corners and things are all things to consider. And I'd highly recommend taking a test piece of fabric and playing with some different stitches and playing with the style before you actually work on your actual project, so you can make sure that it gives you the results that you want and that you've tested the stitch width and the stitch length and all of those things ahead of time. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to go grab just a little, we're going to grab stitch 40 here. And this is just a little, it's basically a decorative stitch, but I find that stitches that have a little bit of movement like this are a little bit more forgiving if I don't sew perfect. So I love using a stitch like this. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to select 40 here, get that in there. And then for this stitch, I am just going to stay lined up. I'm going to try to keep that little dot there lined up on the line of my fabric here. And then I'm going to be using my start stop button. And then I'm just going to keep that lined up. And I'm going to try to keep this as lined up as I can. So that way that applique stitch is going over the edge of my heart. And as you can see, since this stitch moves sort of, side to side, it gives me a lot of, I think it gives me a little bit more wiggle room. So here, we'll just stop this here. And you can see what that looks like. So you can see that has done a nice little stitch all the way around. And that really looks pretty good. And I'm honestly not very good at this. So that is one way. Another way would be to do just a little, you could do even just a little straight stitch. So if I go back here, and I'm going to pick my straight stitch in my left needle position. And you can adjust your needle position in a straight stitch, right, with your stitch width or stitch length. And so what I'm going to try to do with this one is I'm going to keep my little flange here lined up with the edge, and I just want to tack it down with a straight stitch around the edge. And so depending on where I move my needle will sort of show me how far away the stitch is going to be from the edge of my fabric. So if I think this looks good, I would start here, and then I would just keep that lined up. And of course, if you were doing this, you could slow your machine down. Like, it might be easier, particularly on curves, if your machine is going slower. So this would be another way. We're going to cut this so you can sort of see how that one looks. So here you can see we followed along the edge, and it's tacking it down, but it does leave the raw edge. And that's, over here you've got the sort of decorative stitch. And then the final way that I thought I would show you today is a blanket stitch. I personally find this one really, really hard, because when you take your corners, you have to really think about how those blanket stitches are going to turn the corner. But a lot of people like a traditional blanket stitch. And so, there's a couple different in this machine. We might just use 33. And you can set it up. And I should have left a little bit more room, but we'll just sort of go right here. And did I grab a second? Oh, okay. And we're just going to we'll just go right here. We'll start we'll just go back over this space, because that's going to be the easiest to sort of show you on a little bit straighter edge there. So we have our stitch here, and where my needle is right now on a blanket stitch is where it's going to tack over. So if I wanted to adjust where it was going to tack over, I would adjust my width. So maybe I want to bring my width in a little bit, because I'm going to bring my needle down. That's where it's going to tack over. So then I'm going to try to keep that lined up, maybe a little bit faster. So it's just doing that blanket stitch, and I'm trying to keep that straight stitch right on the edge of my fabric that I'm appliquing down. And this is where you can really see that having the open toe foot really helps you see what is going on. Now, of course, you could see your thread better if it was really a different color, but for your final project, it's going to be more forgiving if you, stop this here, if you are using matching threads. So you can see here, I've got a little blanket stitch that goes up and over the edge here. It's sort of messy with, because I put it next to that straight stitch, and maybe we'll do one right here so you can see it a bit better. Maybe we'll make it a little bit wider. Let's make it a little wider so you can see it better. So I'm going to go on that edge there, and it's going to go and of course, if you are appliquing on things that are straight, it is much, much easier than things that are curved. But there you go, you can see better there. There's that little blanket stitch that goes across the edge. And you can sort of see, since I'm not great at this, why I love this sort of stitch. Because I find this sort of stitch very forgiving, because you can't tell as much if I didn't sew like perfectly straight against my edge, because it has a little bit of movement in it. So that is, when I do applique that I'm just going to sew, I almost always use a stitch much more like something like that, because it's just easier for me. The other one that I might use is where that straight stitch, or you can do the blanket stitch. And finally, the stitch that we didn't really talk about is you could always do a satin stitch as well. And a satin stitch is just a zigzag with your stitch length smaller, so that way it's really sort of nice and dense. So that would be another way that you could do applique. So this is machine applique. So hopefully that answers, that explained it to some people who maybe haven't done it before. I'm going to just move this machine, set her down here, because we are going to want to be able to see some other items. So the other way you can do applique is you can do it on your embroidery machine. So what I've set up here is something sort of similar to this guy right here. It's a heart. There's a heart design right here. I have some fabric here, and I have this set up for myself, and I'm realizing that, well, we're gonna let the machine go. We'll get it started. So when an embroidery design is designed for applique, there are a lot of designs out there that are designed for applique, and you can tell because of the way that it comes into your machine. So right now, even though this is a one color design, there are 3 color changes. It's the same color, but they have 3 stops in here, because the first one is for the applique material. So the very first thing that the machine is going to do is draw an outline of where I'm going to put my applique material. And then the second line is going to tack it down, and then I will trim it, and then the third line will do the finishing touch. So I think I'm actually going to change my thread color here, because I think you're going to see it better. So I actually am using this King Star Metallic because it's fun and beautiful, and I just think it's fun. And it's what I had originally used in that onesie that I showed you. So when you're using a metallic thread, you are going to want it to be upright. It's going to be a lot happier. So like I'm using the XP2 here, and this machine has a thread stand connected to the back of it for vertical thread. You can also, some machines have a pin that goes here. You can also get a thread stand that sits next to your machine that keeps the thread upright. And then I'm just going to thread this guy here. Use my handy needle threader. There we go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to have it do here, I've already have it set up. If I wanted to see where my design was going to be, I could use my trace feature here, and I could go to each 4 corner. I could go to any spot in the middle if I want to see where the middle spot is. But I think that is good because we are just using this as a demonstration. So I'm going to hit start, and it's going to do the outline here of where that heart is going to go. Okay, and now it says applique position. So now I'm going to lay my applique fabric in. Now the fabric I'm using is this really fun new, what do they call it? It's Sparkle Vinyl by OESD. And what I love about this is it has a fabric back. So it's vinyl on top. So it gives you, like in the finished product here where I've used it, this is the white one. It gives this really fun texture to your applique. It's a little different than regular fabric, but since it has this fabric backing, it's really soft and it's nice to work with. So this is what I'm going to use. And if depending on how big the design was, you might choose to use a little bit of like, this is the R&K pink tape to hold it down. And then of course you want to make sure, like I'm double checking to make sure that my fabric is totally covering where my stitching is, right? Because if it was like over here a little bit, well, I'd have a hole in my heart, which we wouldn't want that. So you want to make sure that all of the stitching is covered, and then you're good. And then you're going to have it embroider that second line there. Okay, and then now what we do is we take, I unlocked it too soon. The machine is like, no, thank you. Okay, there we go. Then we're gonna take our hoop. We're gonna leave the fabric hooped in the fabric, right? And in the fabric is gonna say hooped in the hoop. But we are gonna take it to our lap here, and I'm going to trim this fabric as close to that line as possible. And I find it is easier to do it with a scissor that has a duckbill. Like here is another rounded scissor, and I love this scissor for other techniques. It's one of my favorites for trimming because of the blunt point. But this guy, this is the R&K micro duckbill, so it's small, so it can really get into little spaces, and it has this nice duckbill here. And what the duckbill is doing for me is it's allowing me to get a little closer to the edges here, because I can just push it against that line of where my thread is. And you really want this to be as close as possible, because the closer you get it, the better that your applique is going, the finished applique is going to look. Because if you have a big thick edge on the side there, then it's going, when it does that satin stitch around the edge, it's not going to be able to finish, it's not going to cover all of it, and you'll have a little edge. So I always do my first big cutout like this, and then I would go back in here and see if there's any more little bits that I can get, right? And it really depends on your design as to how far over it's going to go, but you want to get it as close as you can. And then once you're good, you're going to put it back on your machine, and you are going to hit the start button here. And now it is going to go through here and do the applique stitch all the way around the edge. You can see it's doing a really nice job by matching the thread color to the color of the fabric of the applique. It's also going to make it look better. So if they're contrasting colors, it's still going to work, but if you want it to look the most perfect every time, matching the thread color to the fabric color is going to look better, and you can see that on some of these samples, right? Because since the yellow matches the yellow of the fabric here and the orange matches here, if there was a little spot where maybe some of this fabric was poking out a little bit or something, you wouldn't notice it as much because the colors are all the same. And these ones are sort of cute too, little mug rugs. And the matching colors help. This one is a contrasting color, but it still looks great because the embroidery was all trimmed. So this is finishing up And while it finishes here, hopefully you can hear me well enough, but I want to tell you another fun thing about applique. So you can see here where we had the square of fabric, right? We set it in and we had to trim it. Well, you know what? Yes, question?
Yeah, Dawn wants to know which designs you're using. She said, which designs are these?
These are just designs built into the XP. So most embroidery machines have some sort of just shape designs built in. And a lot of, with some machines, like with the XP, I can go in and say, oh, I want to use the heart and I want to make it an applique. And so that is what I did with this design, is I just went in and picked one of those borders and said, I want this to be an applique. Some machines can also make patches. If you have a digitizing software of some form, a lot of times you can take designs in there and turn them and create a design that has the applique lines. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do applique. Sometimes even there'll be a design that just does an outline, and you can just stop it after the outline, insert your fabric, do that outline again, trim it, and then have it do the rest of the design, even if it wasn't designed to be applique. So there are some different, once you understand what needs to happen for an applique design to work, you can choose different designs. The other thing is lots and lots of embroidery designs out there are designed for applique. Like a lot of the Kimberbell designs, like the new spring showers that's in our current catalog, those are all designed for applique. And what's extra cool about those is that those designs also come with the SVG files. And right now you're probably like, SVG, Carmen, what are you talking about? But yes, question?
Sorry, 2 more questions.
Yes.
Someone's asking about the scissors. Like, what are the brand of scissors and do we sell them?
Yes. These are the R&K. They're made by R&K. They're called the micro duckbill scissors. They're on our website. Yes.
And then another question, Dawn wanted to know about the cat and dog designs. Do you know which design collection those are from?
I do. So the cat and dogs are cute. These are the patchwork pet quilts designs by Anita Good Design. And these are new. These are just from about a year ago, so they're in their current line. Yeah, I know. Really fun, right? Cute critters. I love how the bird's on the dog's tail. Pretty fun. Okay, any other questions? Nope. Okay, so now we're going to talk about SVG files. And I don't mean to use an acronym, but what's really cool is you can actually, I'm going to pull my scan and cut forward here. You can actually use your scan and cut to pre-cut out a lot of your applique designs if you have a scan and cut. So I've got my machine here, and you can sort of see, I have some samples, right? So like here, this is this applique design. Well, we cut the apple out ahead of time on the scan and cut. So then you don't have to do any of that trimming. You just do the outline, you lay it in there, and then it does the rest of it, and you don't have to do the cutting. The machine does all the cutting, and guess what? When the scan and cut does it, it is perfect. And so there's a lot of embroidery design collections, like many of the Kimberbell collections, that will actually come with the files, so that way you can cut them out. Some embroidery designs that are appliques, you can download them, the SVG files. But the other thing you can do is, let's say you have a large embroidery project, not embroidery, but an applique project that you want to maybe do with your embroidery machine, or even an applique project that you're going to sew yourself on your just regular sewing machine, right? Because the scan and cut scans, you could scan your pattern and have it cut them all out for you ahead of time. Because it is much easier if you, it's much easier to let the machine cut them out than you doing all the cut out work yourself. So you can use this for regular applique, use the scan and cut to pre-cut it out when you're using your regular sewing machine to sew it together. Or sometimes you can even have files that are actually designed for the embroidery design that you're using that will cut them out to the right size. There's lots of options. Yes.
2 questions. Gail wants to know, do the mini duckbill come in left-handed?
The mini duckbill do not, but if you are a left-handed, the Quilter Select, what are they called? The name is evading me right now, but the Quilter Select has a beautiful scissor with a duckbill and a great little point, and those come left-handed. So if you go to my website and you search Quilter Select scissor, you should be able to find it, and we'll also post it down here later today. But that one does come left-handed. The R&K one does not.
Susan wants to know, do you cut the sticky applique paper along with the fabric?
Yes, you cut it at the same time. So normally what I would do is I would take my just whole piece of fabric, right? and attach it to my applique wonder. So they were together first and then cut it out, then cut out my shapes.
Another question came in. They have a circuit maker and they want to know if it works the same to make cuts.
You probably have maybe a Cricut, and the Cricut works similarly in that it can cut out different files. It's a little different than the scan and cut in that the scan and cut. So the Cricut can definitely cut different things, but the scan and cut is great because it's designed for fabric, which is really unique, and it can scan. So the scanning is the cool thing about the scan and cut that is really unique in the marketplace of crafting cutting machines. So let me do one other question.
Which digitizing software is good for this, and is it compatible with most embroidery sewing machines?
Yeah, so my favorite is the Floriani software because it is compatible with pretty much most of all of the machines out there. And it has a really cool save to sew feature. They've got a lot of great tutorials. And they're always updating it. So that is my favorite software, and it goes for pretty much all the brands. Most machine manufacturers also make a software, and they are all great. But Floriani is just my favorite. Okay. So here we go. Let me just show you. So you can sort of see here, like, this is a good example of where like this was cut out, and you can see we have that, the applique wonder on the back. So I would peel this off and then it would become sticky. So this here, you can see how if this was that outline for layering my fabric in, how this would just match in there perfectly, right? And then you can see how it's been done here. So these are just some samples, but let me just show you real quick how the scan and cut works. So I am going to just unload this so that way it's prepared because we're gonna load my fabric mat here. And then we're just gonna go cut a heart out. And then part of what I wanted to show you here is that the scan and cut can cut fabric. I'm using the fabric mat. It can cut vinyls. It can cut cork fabric. It can cut paper. It can cut all sorts of different things, which is pretty handy. So I'm just gonna go to pattern here and I'm just gonna go pick a heart. Now I could have taken, if I had a design that if I had something that already had, like if I had an embroidery design collection that had SVG files, I could just put them on my USB stick here and then put it in the machine and then cut from it. Just how like this USB can work on here. And these are nice. If you have an embroidery machine at home that struggles with some of our large USB sticks, we do carry these little 2 or 4 gigabyte USB sticks that work on almost all sewing machines. But we're just gonna go down here and I'm just gonna go pick a heart design. So maybe I want this heart and I could adjust my size. Maybe I want it a little bit smaller, really however I want it. Maybe I wanna make it a little wider and not so fat, whatever I want. And then I'm gonna go to set. Now, there's a couple of different things here. One, this is my entire mat, right? So here's my whole mat, but you can see my fabric is here. Well, I'm gonna use the scanning feature so that way I know if I wanna put the heart right here where it's gonna go. So I'm gonna scan and start, and then it's going to scan this for me. So then I can have perfect placement on my fabric or on my vinyl or whatever I'm cutting. So you can see here, there's the big heart. This is my fabric. So now I want to move this guy somewhere else. I want to cut him out right there. And I'm going to go okay. And then when I go to please select here, it wants to know, do I want to cut it? Do I want to draw it? Do I want to emboss it? Do I want to foil it? Or do I want to pierce it? So there's lots of different options because there's all of these different things this Scan and Cut can do. But today we're cutting, so I'm going to cut. Now I have already done a little test earlier. So I oftentimes when even though this is, these machines are an auto blade, meaning they're going to adjust the depth for you, I still test it. And you can see I tested it here and the test is really easy to run. But I've already tested it, and you can see that's what that test button means. So I'm just going to go to cut. I'm just going to start. And it's going to go over here, and it's going to cut out that heart for me. Okay, look at that. It is all finished cutting. And then I'm just gonna use my little spatula here to grab an edge. And then I can just pull this up just like that, and it has cut it out. And you can see different sizes depending on what you were doing, right? And so then, if let's say I was making this guy here, and it had drawn the line for me, I could just lay this in, and then it would just go perfectly around it for me, and I wouldn't have to do the cutting. So the scan and cut, if you have one, is a great way to work on your applique to make it a lot easier for you and to make it incredibly professional. I realized that I forgot to talk. Oh, question.
Yeah, Kim wants to know, does the SDX225F do what you're talking about?
Yes, the SDX225 will definitely do the scanning and the cutting and all of that good stuff. It has I'm on the 325, which is the upgraded version, has a couple of extra features, but most of what I just talked about, your 225 is gonna do. Yeah, great. Okay, so I did forget to talk about monofilament thread. So the other thing that you can do with applique, and that's what was done on this one, when you're just doing it on your regular sewing machine, is you can either use like actual pink thread, or you can also use a monofilament thread. So then it's tacking it down, but you're not going to see the stitches, if that makes sense, quite as much. And a monofilament thread, you would just only use this in your top, and your bobbin would be a normal thread. And then there's a clear one and a smoke one. And that's because the clear one is good on lighter fabric and the smoke one is better on darker fabric. So that is another option that I forgot to mention. Okay, well, I don't think I forgot anything else. So hopefully that was helpful to sort of explain a couple of different ways that you can do applique, whether it be you're doing it on your home sewing machine from a pattern, or if you're doing it with your embroidery machine, or if you have a scan and cut or a cutting machine and you want to pre-cut the items out and then use them in either of those places, it can be very helpful. So have fun, post your questions down here. We're Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and our website's qualitysewing.com. Give us a call sometime if you have any questions.